The summer of 1983 brought America a road trip movie so outrageous, so filled with mishaps, and so gleefully inappropriate that it became the gold standard for family vacation disasters. National Lampoon's Vacation turned Chevy Chase into the patron saint of bumbling dads, put the family truckster in the Hall of Fame of terrible movie cars, and gave audiences one of the most talked about pool scenes of the decade, featuring supermodel Christie Brinkley. Only, what you think you saw in that scene wasn't exactly what happened on set. Let's just say there was a lot more nylon and a lot less skin than you might remember. But before we get to Brinkley's little Hollywood magic trick, let's talk about how Vacation became the ultimate road comedy. Directed by Harold Ramis and written by a then-rising John Hughes, the movie was based on Hughes' own short story Vacation 58, first published in National Lampoon magazine. In the original short story, the family vacation ends with Clark taking a pistol to Disneyland's founder. So yes, the original material was darker than the sunny road trip we got. Hughes lightened it for the screen, but the bones of the story, long drives, roadside disasters, and a dad's desperate attempt to hold his family together, remained intact. The setup was simple. Clark Griswold, a terminally optimistic family man, wants to give his wife and kids the trip of a lifetime. A cross-country drive from Chicago to the Disneyland-inspired Wally World. Along the way, the Griswolds encounter traffic accidents, bad motels, toxic relatives, questionable roadside cuisine, and more than a few incidents that probably should have landed Clark in jail. And of course, they make the trip in the ugliest car possible, the Wagon Queen family truckster. Underneath its 8 headlights, faux wood paneling, and pea green paint job, it was actually a Ford LTD Country Squire, heavily modified to look like a rolling disaster. Harold Ramis even joked that they kept adding more ugly until it felt right. The truckster became such a symbol of suburban hopelessness that, after the film, station wagon sales took a nosedive, paving the way for the minivan boom. Production didn't fake the road trip. The cast and crew really zigzagged across America. They shot in more than a dozen states, including Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, Arizona, and California. The Cousin Eddie scenes were filmed in Boone, Colorado, at a real farmhouse, which they dressed up to look even more rundown than it was. No one on set was sure exactly how Eddie was related to the Griswolds until midway through filming, when they decided his wife Catherine and Ellen Griswold were cousins. Randy Quaid gave Eddie his signature creepy tongue click, a tick he borrowed from a neighbor in his hometown, and marked the script every time he wanted to use it. Then there was Aunt Edna, played by TV legend Imogene Coca. Initially reluctant to take on such a mean-spirited role, she was convinced by Ramis to play it as mean as you want. Even so, she would sometimes turn to her castmates during takes and whisper, "Was that too mean?" The cast adored her, even if her character was so horrible that the audience cheered when the Griswolds accidentally left her corpse in a backyard. The film's most infamous dark gag, the family accidentally dragging a dog to its demise, was almost too funny for the cast to get through. Chevy Chase and James Keach, who played the motorcycle cop, could barely contain themselves, often tearing up from trying not to laugh. And then there was Wally World. The amusement park scenes were filmed at Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, California. Clark calls the main coaster the Whippersnapper, but it's actually the Revolution, the first roller coaster to feature a vertical loop. The cast had to ride it repeatedly for hours to get all the coverage. Dana Barron, who played Audrey, had to take motion sickness pills, but the pills made her so drowsy she'd pass out between takes. Anthony Michael Hall admitted that some of his wide-eyed expressions on the ride were pure terror. The movie's original ending didn't have John Candy at all. Test audiences hated that the Griswolds didn't get to Wally World, so Ramis called in Candy, who shot his cameo as security guard Lasky in just a few days. Candy modeled his performance after a recurring Canadian security guard character from his stage work. Originally, Clark was supposed to ride up front with Lasky, but the coaster seats couldn't fit both of them comfortably, so Rusty got the spot. If you are enjoying this video so far, make sure to subscribe for more wild stories from the classics. Now, back to the video. The shoot had its share of on-set pranks too. Chevy Chase was notorious for improvising lines, which sometimes cracked up the crew so badly they ruined takes. In one instance, during a dinner scene, Chase ad-libbed an entire speech about Hamburger Helper that left the camera operators shaking with laughter. Now, back to Christie Brinkley. At the time, she was one of the most famous faces in modeling, gracing Sports Illustrated covers and dominating high-fashion campaigns. Casting her as the mysterious girl in the Ferrari was a stroke of genius. She's barely in the movie, but every time she appears, zipping past the Griswolds in her red Ferrari 308 GTS with plates reading "Love Me," the movie slows down to let the audience take her in. Brinkley actually stayed for most of the shoot, even on days she wasn't filming, just to hang out with the cast and go horseback riding or whitewater rafting. John Hughes's original script had her character flirting with Rusty before turning her attention to Clark, and the infamous pool scene was supposed to end with her stripping naked. But Brinkley flat out refused to do nudity. So Harold Ramis and the costume department got creative. They designed a flesh-tone nylon bodysuit that looked convincingly like bare skin under the pool lights. On camera, it played as if Brinkley was skinny dipping, but in reality, she was completely covered. Brinkley later said she had no regrets about the decision. It kept the scene sexy without crossing her personal boundaries. And here's the kicker. Even with the bodysuit, Brinkley was freezing during that night shoot. The water was icy, and between takes, crew members would wrap her in blankets while she sipped hot tea. Chevy Chase, meanwhile, improvised several of his double-take reactions, which made the final cut. The result? Audiences still remember the scene 40 years later, and most never realized they'd been fooled. It's a prime example of how clever filmmaking can get the same effect without showing anything explicit. When National Lampoon's Vacation hit theaters, it pulled in over $60 million on a $15 million budget and launched a franchise with 5 sequels and counting. It also cemented the Griswolds as America's favorite dysfunctional family and gave Chevy Chase one of his most enduring roles. Today, the film still works because it's both outrageous and relatable. Anyone who's ever been on a long family trip knows the combination of boredom, irritation, and unexpected disasters, though hopefully without dead dogs or Aunt Edna. And while Clark's misguided attempts to impress Christie Brinkley's mystery woman are ridiculous, they're also part of what makes him so endearingly clueless. Now it's time to hear from you. Did you ever suspect Christie Brinkley wasn't really skinny dipping in Vacation? Comment below. Make sure to subscribe for more wild stories from the classics.